It's showtime, throw time with me, my buddy who just left the screen, Jay Bartlett. Today, we are talking about a number of things for everybody that's excited to be here. We're talking some new ticket tiers for N64 Quest. We're going to talk about the Switch NWC physical stuff. We're going to talk about a new app that I saw drop called the Delta Emulator, who is already in the midst of potentially a lawsuit. Summer Game Fest, any indie games that Jay and I might be playing. And of course, moments, the biggest moments that changed gaming forever. Jay, welcome, my friend. How are you today? You've been on an internet hiatus.
Hello?
Hello.
Is anybody here?
We are here.
I am coming to you from a different time. I'm coming to you from 1999 land, where
99 Land is a good time.
where high speed did not exist yet. Hi, how are you guys?
Cheers to everybody. Cutthroat Comics is, hi, it's Jay and Rob. I am ready. Let us do this. So here we are. I'm sure people on lunch are going to float in soon, which is nice. Let's get to the big kind of news, Jay. You and I have been talking for the last 10 days about the N64 Quest tickets. Of course, it's our raffle in support of Alzheimer's connected to N64 Quest that comes out this November. And we've introduced 2 new ticket tiers. Did you want to reveal what these ticket tiers are or your thoughts about leading up to this decision?
We talked about it. I don't have anything in front of me. I don't want to misquote it, but we were talking about opening up different tiers that might be more accessible to everybody. So we were both really open to that. And then we kind of brainstormed over a couple of days and came up with what you have in front of you.
Right. So previously there was a $25 tier that made you a guaranteed winner. We really like this, especially as our initial offering, because that meant everybody that wanted to get in on it was going to get something cool, whether it's a game, merch, or something signed by us. Then we thought, well, maybe that $25 is a little hard for everybody to jump on board, or maybe it's too much of a gamble for people that want something a little bit more specific. So we came up with 2 new tiers. The $5 tier, which gives you basically just a random shot at potentially winning $5. That's it. It's your chance at getting a game or merch or something signed, but it is not guaranteed. And then for those that wanted a guaranteed game, we opened up just 100 limited tickets for $50, and you're guaranteed to get a game from the Quest, which is pretty cool. So it's better than
I like that.
1 in 3 shot at the $25 level. You double down on your cash, you get it. So basically, for the price of 2 tickets, you secure your fate for that. And $5, hey, if you might get something, you might not, but you're supporting Alzheimer's, which is great, which is kind of what we're doing as well.
Yeah, this way it's just, like I said, more accessible for everybody. And I think it gives people who are maybe skeptical on the $25 price point a chance to support regardless, which is great. I like that guaranteed game one. See, that's the one I would do for sure.
Yeah.
I would definitely.
I wouldn't even care what it is to know that I had something from the thing on the TV with the guys doing the quest.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah, I would definitely do that too. I wouldn't care. I think it would be just cool. You and I love movie props. We talked about this before. So I think owning a piece of the show, I think, is really cool. I think it's a good idea. Not a lot of TV shows, documentaries do this kind of thing. I always joke about the first film you did. I kept bugging you to get some of the props off that. That was kind of funny.
Yeah. But they were cool enough that you wanted it because it was in a movie, right? I mean, this you get to see the story of how the cart comes into play, more or less, I would say. Or at least we should be able to kind of figure it out for you. Not every single second of the journey is, of course, in the 13 episodes, but it's part of the journey. So this is your chance, once in a lifetime. I want to talk about Icebreaker though this week. This is what a lot of people love when we talk off the cuff. The Icebreaker, usually just nobody knows what's going on. Without revealing the future, what advice would you give to your 13-year-old self, Jay? And I want to maybe, I know this is kind of the thing that I threw at you, but I want to twist it a bit. What
Sure.
gaming or pop culture advice would you give to your 13-year-old self? If you could go back in time to 13-year-old Jay, what would you let him know about gaming or pop culture? Some advice to take stock of without revealing the future. or doing like the Marty McFly kind of disrupting the time continuum?
I would say to my 13-year-old self, don't let anybody tell you that playing video games is a waste of time or is not going to lead up to anything in your adult life, because it will.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Uh,
I think I would say play as much as you can while you can, because you have no idea what's coming.
yeah, that's good too. Yeah. I mean, we certainly all have different paths. And yeah, I think it's important to, I mean, my generation's a little bit different than yours, not too much, but, or the time we went to school. I know that when I was in school, a lot of teachers really tried hard to squash my dreams, my peers' dreams, because what we wanted to do is not in the ordinary 9 to 5 vein. So we weren't allowed to do that. So I would definitely go into the bedroom of my 13-year-old self as he's playing the Sword of Vermilion with you by his side. And I would say, guys, follow your heart, keep doing what you want to do and what you're passionate about, because someday it will pay off.
Yeah, and I think there's something to just living in that moment of gaming in the day. Now it's so tempting. Oh, I missed this game. I'm gonna go attack this backlog. It's like you'll never get through the backlog because there are
It's
so many games,
impossible. Yeah.
to try to play with what's coming out now, to try to go back and rediscover the classics. So again, play as much as you can while you can, because you don't know what's coming. I think that would apply for anybody at all ages of gaming, no matter when you get into it. Because I'm sure as glad with what we're doing now, everything that we soaked up when we could, because there came a
Yeah.
time where this awesome stuff came out that I couldn't keep up anymore. I wanted to, the desire was there, but other factors prevented it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think you to some degree. I mean, I know films are your number one, but for me, like reading those magazines and absorbing that knowledge, it just seemed and felt right. Learning about the companies that I loved and how technology was changing and how gaming was becoming more prominent, more important, and slowly taking over TV and film. I mean, there was just something to that. I just knew I always wanted to be a part of it. And we know Nintendo Quest. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
10 years ago, 11 years ago, I didn't know what that meant on Todd's driveway. You and Jordan were hammering me, and I know now, but I didn't know then. I knew I wanted to be a part of it. I was at GameStop at the time. That was starting to feel not right. So it was just figuring it out, but glad I did finally.
Cutthroat Comics says maybe tell Little J to buy all the games consoles now. That's what his advice to your 13 yourself. Keep buying all the game consoles.
Well, this is a little tiny portion, buddy. These are all from my childhood.
I'm gonna blow that up so people can see it a little bit easier.
Yeah, so this is one shelf. You guys will see the back of this when I'm doing Friday Night Versus. You see the back of this wall.
You'll
But
also see it in Planet Cool Stuff Season 1 when you give us a little game room tour.
Planet Cool, Nintendo 64 Quest. But yeah, that was good advice. That is good advice, Cutthroat. So thank you. I'll make sure to tell my 13-year-old self that after.
Country Boy Niner says, howdy, fellas. Howdy, sir. Or ma'am,
Hello.
whatever might the case be. Severus wants to know, what's the deadline, gents, for the N64 Quest? This is the other change that we made. We haven't forced it too hard. We're moving it from the end of June to the end of July just to give people a little bit more time, because that would only give us 6 weeks with this new ticket tier. So we want everybody to breathe a little bit, and we should still be able to comfortably get the content from the live stream raffle into the show at that timeline. Plus, it gives you more time. So if you want to buy a couple more tickets, then that'll be good. We did toy with the idea of doing mini raffles leading up to it, but that introduced a whole bunch of other variables that we just didn't want to have to tackle and couldn't find any elegant solution for. So there you go.
I like the different tiers. I think it makes sense, and I think people will be happy with it for sure.
Country Boy Niners got a question for us. Playing any multiplayer games recently? Helldivers 2? Are you guys playing Helldivers 2 or maybe Helldivers 2?
Yeah, I played quite a bit of it. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed my time with it. But I haven't really felt the urge to go back. There was a couple of weeks I was streaming it. It's a great game.
Tell me about this game. I don't know about Helldivers 2.
Just
I'm assuming it's
imagine
a
if you
sequel.
could play. It's a third-person shooter. Imagine if you could play Starship Troopers. It's
Mm.
exactly like that. So you
I
and
want to know more.
four mates pop down to planets and kill bugs. It's just as easy as that. The thing is, there's objectives and you have to work together. So unless you're on the mic with people, it's pretty hard to play with strangers.
Right.
You can do it, but it's harder. And then you're just shooting, doing objectives, flying back up. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of arcadey fun.
Gotcha. Cool. And obviously, does the planet change? So every time you drop down, is it like a roguelite game where it's always different?
There's hundreds of planets that you can go to. Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. It's
There
great.
you go. Well, I'm getting asked a question now. Rob, what is your favorite Nintendo N64 game? What a good question. Oh man. What a
Tough
good
one,
question.
though.
It's a tough one though. It
What is
depends on the
base
mood
one's
I'm in.
answer on?
It depends on the mood I'm in, right? Like it's hard to steer away from some of those multiplayer experiences, but you know, if I was by myself and I just needed to play a game by myself,
Don't say it.
you know, I'm one that really likes adventures and
Don't
quests.
say it. Don't say it.
And there's always one that comes to mind, and I know Mission Impossible and Win Back are up there as possible games, but you know, there's a certain adventure tale that is just so whimsical and magical.
And blank. It's literally a canvas where you can make your own game.
I don't know.
I do.
You think that you know because you built this thing up in your head that is not actually a thing.
No, I remember.
Jay thinks I'm gonna say
no. I remember we were talking about this game in the van, and I was talking about, oh yeah, you love this. You're like, no, I hated it, and I thought it was the opposite. I thought you did like it. So, just teasing.
Jay thinks I love Quest 64. Like I am the Quest 64 flag bearer. If there was a flame that kept the passion of Quest 64 alive in the universe, it would be my sole duty to guard the flame and keep its fire stoked so that it never dies out. I will say this about Quest 64. There is no water temple, which makes it a superior game to Ocarina of Time in so many ways, just by the absence of such a maniacal level. Water goes up, boots go on. Water goes down, boots come off. I'm good. Hard pass. Probably Rogue Squadron, though. That's probably my favorite N64 game. If I was just to throw something on by myself.
Rogue Squadron. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, flies under the radar, no pun intended, but it's a good one. It's up there on, I think, usually comes in the top 25 for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would say that Mission Impossible and Win Back. But you got some taste, man. Werewolf, oof, boy.
That's Genesis. Werewolf. Win Back introduced stealth, spy ops way before Metal Gear did, which is nice, where you can win missions just through stealth and not have to do run and gun. And like it also introduced like peering around the corner and being able to shoot and hide back around the corner. So some good stuff there as well. What else should we talk? Oh my god. Hey, so last week I mentioned a site that has region free stuff that you couldn't get. Play Asia was the site. I completely forgot about it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So that's what we call a nice callback. You can go listen to me try to frantically remember it. I got some crazy news, my friend. Uh-oh. It's a little embarrassing, but I'm sharing it so that nobody else suffers the same fate as me.
Let's hear.
My credit card got hacked. And it's been hacked unknowingly for 5 years by one perpetrator over 873 transactions.
Wow.
And you're thinking, how did you not notice for 5 years that your credit card was hacked with that many transactions?
Well, I'm guessing they used it to pay something small each month, like $10 or something.
Sometimes it was $10, sometimes it was just $1. And it read as an in-app service, like an Apple service charge fee. And unless you go through like one or two submenus, you don't actually see what it is. And it was for an app that I never downloaded. It was connected to some stock trading app, and I'd
So
never
they're getting
touched it at
what,
all.
$1 to $10 from you every month or something?
Sometimes it was $49.99, and the way I couldn't see it is because I buy a lot of movies. I rent a lot of movies. I have a lot of apps and subscriptions. So when it comes up and says Apple services $2.99, oh well, I just rented a movie.
Ah, okay.
So that's okay. So that mixes, it's easy to tell.
Yeah.
But 873 transactions, and they got busted because they got greedy. They had 3 transactions in succession within a minute for over $900 each.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw that. I'm like, what is this? Flagged it as fraud. And then I saw that there was a transaction history.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that, buddy. That's rough.
Well, I'm thankful that I have an Apple card, and it's as simple as texting Apple and saying, hey, this happened. And I literally screenshotted all the transactions and they reversed everything.
Oh, wicked, man.
Yeah, so they investigated it for over a week, and they said, hey, this turns out to be legit. Sorry about this, and they credited me all the money back, which is nice to have a little bit of influx of cash. But I'm saying this to everybody out there because when we're playing these games and we're on our cell phones, we're doing in-app purchases, be careful and go back and check your credit card statements and all your memberships and stuff, just in case something's flying under the radar like that. You don't want to deal with that, especially if you don't have the ease of which an Apple card lets you kind of challenge this or investigate. You've got to go through stuff and send stuff in, or heaven forbid, have to fax material in somewhere. Who uses a fax machine these days? Sometimes it's
Yeah.
required.
You know what's strange along those lines, since I've been without the internet since Saturday, just going to the shelf and picking up a season of whatever TV show or a movie and putting it in was really satisfying. And I found that doing that, like it lowered my stress level. Isn't that strange? Because it
You
was
want to
just
hear
like
something? Go
I
ahead.
just like put the movie in, or we, started watching Dexter again, and you just put it in and you just deal with it. It's not like you don't have 10,000 choices. I mean, there's about a good couple hundred movies there, but there's something different, right? It's calming.
Yeah.
And then you just pick it up, you put it in, and I've really been enjoying it. And as much as I praise YouTube, clearly I love YouTube, but that and Netflix alone, you're just searching for whatever, and then you find it, and it's like, well, you want to find the best version of that playthrough or whatever. Right? So, yeah.
Similarly,
Yeah, go ahead.
you're going to love this. Similarly, my daughter Scarlett comes home on Friday and she's in kindergarten. She gets homework. It's obviously not a ton of homework. So we open up her bag, and it was the long weekend here in Canada. I believe it's for everybody next weekend in America. And it's basically a homework assignment is to go an entire day with 0 screen time. No iPads, no phones, no TVs, nothing. And this just gets dropped on us where we don't get to plan or anything like that. And obviously, we can't just have a TV on in the living room, because if she walks in, you're going to look at it because you're used to looking at it.
Yeah.
And then she wouldn't be able to complete the homework. So we didn't do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but we took yesterday to do it. And it also looped in my 9-year-old son, Harrison, to it, which for him, he loves games. He loves, watching shows and movies and stuff like that. And this is not his homework, but as a family, we're doing this all together. It was so interesting to watch them throughout the day, kind of like figure out, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm bored. And yet, they have lots of toys. They have lots of books. The one thing that they both really gravitated towards right away was music.
Oh, yeah.
Because like, oh, this, and like they almost appreciated it more, that it was filling the air, and they were asking more questions about it, and they were having conversations about it because they weren't just glued to a screen and like shutting off.
Yeah.
And at dinner time, it's like we asked both kids, like, so what did you think so far? There's only a couple hours left. We're gonna do the bath time routine and all that, and go to bed, read some books, and call it a day. And Scarlett said, actually, my brain feels healthy not to have any screens at all. I was like, those are the words she used. I'm like, well, that's awesome. She's like, yeah, I don't want as many screens as we have. This is way better. And she loves being outside and playing and, doing stuff. And Harrison's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. I said, "Is this impossible? Is this too hard for you to do?" He goes, "No." I'm like, "Because if it's too hard, it's okay, but we're gonna get you help, or you can go through the whole day." I'll just go through the whole day. So it
Well,
was funny to
it's
hear him express that.
I think if you have something planned, like a game or something you want to play, or a movie you want to watch, I think that's different. I wouldn't count that. For me, I find the worst part of that is when you just pick it up,
Yeah,
pick up your
well, our
phone or
kids
whatever.
don't. I mean, Harrison has a cell phone for medical reasons, but you know, Scarlett doesn't have to worry about that as much, which is nice.
Yeah, it's like you don't know why you're picking it up, and the next thing you know, you're watching the roast of Tom Brady. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
stuff like that is, and I'm definitely guilty of that. That's the worst stuff that just pulls you in. I think if you're going to go sit down and play a game, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, or watch a show or a movie. But yeah, it's the
well, the difference is, man, kids, they don't unless they learn when to say no, and that was built into the games that you and I played. Like they were too hard to play longer for than X number of hours. Like after a couple hours, if you couldn't beat Ninja Gaiden, you had to take a break because you were done. If you
well, yeah,
couldn't
it
tackle
drains
Diddy Kong
you.
64, you
Yeah,
were gonna throw the controller, so you needed a break.
yeah, it tested
Games
you.
nowadays are
Yeah.
too repetitive that like you play around to Fall Guys or Fortnite, it's like, oh, that was great, I'm gonna keep playing, and then all of a sudden 9 hours have gone.
Well, that's the reward, though. That's different, right? Fortnite rewards you for everything, so that's the draw to that. And it is so basic where you're just, you don't have to build if you want. If you don't want to, you can just go and take guys out. But it's the reward. It's like, one more game, just a bit more XP, and I can get this skin or this skin.
Yeah,
But it's very ingenious. Epic Games is, they should get like some kind of lifetime achievement award, man, for creating one of the greatest and deadly concepts in all of gaming.
yeah, their loop is pretty insane. uh the way that they've crafted that to encourage constant play. It's
But
almost too.
they gave everybody the game for free. It started off as Fortnite Save the World. Uh, this started off as that,
Yeah,
and it did all right. And then they pretty much copied PUBG, and they brought out a free version of a battle royale, free for everybody.
yeah.
Boom, instant hit.
Look at you grabbing from your shelf.
I like this. I like this little corner. I like this little nook. I like
Look at the Jay's Corner Time talk with Jabo. Here he
it.
is.
There's some rare stuff here. We got some 360. Oh, you want to do a
Cutthroat
spotlight? Sure, I'll do your spotlight, kid. No problem.
We'll get to a spotlight later. Cutthroat Comics says I couldn't do that. I'd be like, no TV. I guess I could go play basketball outside. Retro Romer says we have grown quite dependent on our technology. I have my personal PC in front of me, my work PC, my iPad, my phone, my TV, all within arm's reach. It's hard to
Yeah,
escape, but it was cool to see my kids kind of, well, not so much my son, but my daughter like say, I feel better for not being clouded by all this stuff all day and getting excited about other things. And frankly, it was great for me not to have to pick up anything either. It was nice to like, hey, not going to do it. It's like living like a kid again, man. Remember when we were kids and we didn't have this stuff to begin with?
yeah,
I
and
think that drove my son nuts too, that it was so easy for my partner and I just to not worry about it.
and you know what? I always had video games. I had a 2600, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. So I wonder if it had been different if Nintendo had been out when I was a younger kid, because I could put the Atari down no problem. And dude, you can attest to that. You're right there with me. Like, I'm not
Yep.
discrediting the 2600 because it's important for history, but I don't play those games anymore. I don't think they're fun. I think the majority of them are really bad. Um, so for me, it was like I could put down Empire Strikes Back on the 2600 and then go play outside, because it wasn't like until, when Nintendo came, that was different. And it was like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah, I mean, playing time quadrupled when the NES came out because those games had a lot more depth to them and a lot more replayability. But I still say that difficulty factor with those games made it harder to play as long. And they knew kids didn't get as many games. You got one, for your birthday or Christmas, unless you were that kid on the block that had the flag as well, for the most part. So you had to make that game last, or if you rented it on the weekend, like that it was going to be done. And even then, if you can't beat Faxanadu, well, you might just have to give up and take a break. Like now, I mean, I think starting with stuff like the N64 era, when you're really just getting into these match overplays where it's like any kind of sports match where you're playing hockey or basketball, it's the same thing. You want to see the outcome, but it's the same structure and construct. Everybody gets together and plays. That's why I think Mario Kart was a huge hit for the 64. Same with GoldenEye, Perfect Dark. Wrestling is a little bit different because we had to impose our own kind of rules. It was a little bit looser than something like GoldenEye when we were playing, because it's a kind of, what match do you want to kind of go? It wasn't like as defined as like 4 races in a Grand Prix like Mario Kart was, right?
Yeah, but GoldenEye, I was talking about this on one of my streams. Actually, it was the Toy Power guys. We were talking about GoldenEye, and I said,
oh, how was that? Did that go well?
Yeah, it should be out this week. Yeah, those guys. I was on their show a long time ago. Yeah, and just it was like we, time hasn't passed at all. Those guys are great. But we're talking about there's flaws in GoldenEye where if you played something, you could easily just camp spawn sites and stuff. And I said, well, my friends and I, we came up with this rule. You press the trigger and you hold R and you drop to one knee. And it was like an honor system that was kind of protecting people from rage quitting and not wanting to play anymore, because it's so easy to hunt the spawn points. I mean, we still shot people in the back of the head sometimes, but most of the time. So that's like a rule we added, even with the THQ wrestling. Remember, what was it? Entrapment. So there's a flaw in the game design where there's a flaw in the game design where you can hover over someone you've knocked down, and if you time the C button right, you will always pick him up, or you'll grab him because you have, I think it's 1 or 2 frames more than they do. So you time it right, you'll land just as they stand up. So we came up with a rule where no entrapment. So you slam the guy down, give him a chance to stand back up.
Yeah, that's right. Because as you're getting up, you can get thrown into a grapple during the animation in which you have no control to defend yourself.
Yeah, you can't get out of it because you're standing up. Yeah,
that's right.
Entrapment, baby.
We have a question in here. Did Rob and Jay ever play Forts outside as kids? We definitely played outside for sure.
Play what? Forts?
Forts. Did we ever play forts outside? Did we go outside and play forts and stuff? We played guns a lot.
Yeah,
guns.
We had a game called Guns. Did we ever? We had Rob's Treehouse, but I never built one. I never was interested in any kind of like carpentry. My grandpa was big into building things and taught me the basics of tools, but I was never interested in that kind of stuff. So for me to build a fort, we all had friends who liked to do that, and I enjoyed them. I just never myself liked to do that. But we hung out in yours a lot for sure.
Yeah. Bat Stan is here for everyone. He just wants everybody to know. Hello, Jay.
Hey, Stanley. Guys, good to see you. Sorry about Sunday. And I can't see the chat right now. So Rob's doing his best to highlight everything. So good to see you guys.
Yeah. So one thing that was announced not long ago, speaking of the NES era, was a new digital and physical collector's edition, of course, for the Switch, NWC release, in which you'll be able to play a bunch of NWC mini games, Nintendo World Championships 1990, of course. I don't know how many games they're including, but it feels like the NES version of WarioWare a little bit, mixed with the championship format. And of course, it'll be ranked online. The physical comes with a gold replica cart, just a shell, of course. Plus, it looks like posters and stickers and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on something like this?
Yeah, I mean, we got that on the Wii U. We got the NES Remix, which was basically what they're doing with this. It's basically all the black box games and the silver box first prints. Just little parts, like get Samus on the third platform. So boom, 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 next. So it is, a little bit like WarioWare too. I think it's great. I think Nintendo is masters at what they do. They're masters of nostalgia, without it really feeling like they're taking advantage. And the release date in July, summertime, like they know
Yeah.
what they're doing, man. It's so great. I'm looking forward to it. We have a mutual friend, Rob, who works at Nintendo, so I'm trying to get him to score me one. Of course, GameStop and Best Buy, they sold out of pre-orders within like 10 minutes or something. So trying to
Yeah.
score.
I don't know if they're on Amazon yet, or like I see the listing come up every now and then. I'm not really swayed by this one for some reason. As much as I love
Yeah.
NWC and the wizard like vibes from it, I'm just not. I'm good. Maybe because it's so much like NES Remix already. I just don't see like it's something that I'm gonna play, and I don't want something like that on my shelf necessarily.
That was me a few years ago when they did the DS, Nintendo World Championships. I was just like, it's cool, but it didn't interest me. Yeah, this one's kind of neat. I'm interested to see it. I'm not gonna, kill myself trying to find a copy of it. If my buddy pulls through, that's great. If not, I'll grab it digitally. But I think it just looks fun. I think we need those fun. I don't want to call them mindless, but those fun games, and it's always great to revisit old NES games like that with a new twist. Like try and get the 10-second high score on Ice Climber or whatever they're going to introduce into there. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
It's breathing new life into it without you just playing the same old game over and over again. Nintendo's really good at that.
I'm still baffled why, if we're in a pre-order phase for these physical deluxe editions that people want, which is fine if you want it, which is totally cool, all the power to you. Why can't Nintendo just make enough to satisfy those pre-orders? Just have like a pre-order window like so many companies do, instead of just saying it's pre-order, but then they're sold out. Like these
That's
things always seem to sell out for Nintendo. It's not like it's a surprise. Oh,
they did this.
reaching for the shelf again.
They did the same with this. December. When did this come out? 2010. So it's for Mario's birthday, the 25th anniversary. They brought this out for 1 month. Rob, you'll know, a couple years back, they did the same thing with Mario All-Stars Collection on the Switch.
Yep.
It was only available for a short time. I like that they're doing that. I don't want everybody to have the gold cart replica. I want it to be special because
but if you went into EB or GameStop at the time, you could get it. They sold it for a month. It was gonna be in stock. You could order it from Amazon.
Yeah, hold on though. But we GameStop did not have unlimited quantities, and we had 2 allocations each. So I'm just throwing up numbers. It was probably around 50 we got for the Wii, and yes, you could, but it wasn't like something that was replenished throughout the whole month. So it was available in December, meaning they were going to ship it through December. And once those were gone, they were gone. I like that. I think that's cool. I think they should do it for NWC. I think having a gold cart replica again, I think that's something that only some people should have. I think it's reminiscent of the 21 carts that exist, and it should be special. It should be.
Did you sell out of those All-Stars in 2010?
Yeah. This is mine that I got there.
But did the store sell out? Do you remember? Did they actually go through their allocation? Yeah.
Yeah. Most customers came in after Christmas because they didn't know that it was just a month thing. But they did that with
gift card money too.
They did that in December 2002 on the GameCube. They released the Legend of Zelda collection, which had 4 Zeldas on it, and it was only available if you bought a GameCube for 1 month. So,
and Master Quest as well.
Yeah, so they're not strangers to doing that. So I think stuff like that's fun, and this is different than the toy space where a G.I. Joe Classified will be at Target or it's a PulseCon exclusive, and you have to race. This is it just feels more genuine. You know what I mean? Than that, and it's a special thing. It's not something that happens all the time.
One other thing that I saw in the news recently that makes me happy and likely you is that Nintendo is still committing to physical cartridge for their next console, Switch 2 or whatever it's going to be called, which is nice because we had talked last week about, at some point everybody is just going to go to, streaming games or downloadable games, given the success of those programs and the size of media to begin with. it's going to get too bulky, and they know they can get the same amount of money without having any of the physical costs. So it's cool that Nintendo acknowledges that there's a huge segment and an audience out there that wants that physical experience, and that people see value in it.
It is, yeah, and it goes along with their long history of preserving their older games and reintroducing them for new generations, which they've always done. And they're really good at that stuff. My question to you is, what the hell's going to happen to GameStop, the last big chain? Like, if there's a PlayStation 6, new Xbox, no physical discs, I don't know, it just kind of popped in there. Like, what the hell? They can't just sell Switch 2 games and make any kind of
Well,
profit.
they're going to be another trade and save, right? They're going to be a secondhand store, which is why, for the last 10 years they've been pushing used copies, because they make a fortune off of them. And they're going to charge more for the physical stuff than the digital. The baseline price will remain the same for that stuff. I mean, we've even seen that cost go up in recent months as well, right? I think Tears of the Kingdom was $10 more or whatever in the US compared to other places, or the previous games for Nintendo, because it's a bigger game. Nintendo justified it. Well, like, who's going to argue with the cost of that? So
Yeah, I think if you make customers, being Sony and Microsoft, if you make customers buy digital only and then add insult to injury by making them connect to a service at the same time, I believe you will see a video game crash. I can guarantee you that. It's one thing to offer digital only, but it's another thing to have to be online. For instance, I can't play Grand Theft Auto Vice City on my PC because I need to be connected to Rockstar's social network.
This is interesting. This will get to our main topic later, even though we're like 37 minutes into the show. On the same note, big news is this. Have you heard of the Delta emulator that's finally been allowed on the iOS store? So that is out now. It's like number 7 in the entertainment apps. It basically lets you play NES, SNES, 64, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and DS games, like ROMs. They don't provide them, but they allow you to play them on your phone. Is this a good thing, a bad thing? What do you think? Where do you stand on emulation and now being on one of the world's biggest marketplaces? They've already been like threatened with legal action because their app looks like the Adobe app, which they've changed. But
so I think if you're offering, I've always said, if games are not available anymore in some capacity, I don't see anything wrong with emulation. I mean, look at how much money we have spent our entire lives, and this is all of us in the chat. This is everybody on this stuff, right? I am totally against pirating any new games. So when the new Zelda comes out, if you download it, I think that's a pretty crappy move on your part, and Nintendo has every right to come after you. If you're talking about old games that have gone by the wayside, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sorry. And Rob, the argument I always hear is that, well, let's grab one. Let's grab old Phantasy Star.
I love that you're in the shelf corner.
So Phantasy Star, is it okay if I emulate Phantasy Star? And the most common answer, do you know what it is?
No.
The most common answer is, well, if you own a physical copy of Phantasy Star, there's nothing wrong with it, whoever these gatekeepers are. And my comment to that is, I don't even know where I bought this from, but Sega didn't get any money. It was at Joe's Used Game Shack where I bought this like 15 years ago. I never bought this new. So what difference does it make? So I think someone has to preserve all these games. And there's an astonishing number of video games that are just gone. And I'm not even talking about online-only games. That's the nature of those games. I'm talking about old arcade games, NES games. Like, have you gone on the Switch Online lately? There's not much there, man. I pay for it. I have a yearly subscription to it. They add one game maybe a month. Like, there's thousands of games in the NES library total. Yeah. Where are they all?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel in a similar camp to you that if it's not available in some way for me to buy, even if it's on a console that I don't own, then I will look at emulation as a way to experience, even though I'm a little bit of a staunch person in that I think the best way to experience a game is with real hardware
Of
on
course,
on a CRT with a real controller,
of
not
course.
on an iPhone. But if I want to get the experience and see the game and understand what's going on, then yeah, I'll emulate it. Now,
So if
Fantasy
I have
Star,
if I
go on.
want a specific version of Alone in the Dark, if I want Alone in the Dark on 3DO, and my 3DO doesn't work anymore, should I not be allowed to emulate the 3DO Alone in the Dark? I'm not talking about the PC Alone in the Dark, the 3DO version specifically.
I say if the license holder out there is trying to make money because the license is still active, I think
That's
that you're
different.
at the mercy of the market.
Of course, that's totally different. But I think, with the history of video games, with all these games disappearing, and this is a common topic on my channel, it's our responsibility to catalog all this stuff. It's our responsibility to keep this stuff in the history books. You would never, ever in the history of the world think about ever not cataloging every single film that has been made. Can you imagine Citizen Kane just got thrown
There's
by
tons of stuff that slipped through the cracks on film. It's hilarious. You wouldn't believe they don't have an original print of Star Wars anymore. That's how hilarious it is.
But there's still Star Wars, though. I'm talking about, like, I don't know, man. Let me think of
There's tons of big movies that are gone, which is why they introduced the
yeah,
library to preserve it, because it is disappearing. But it's
yes.
at a much higher rate with video games than any other media, except for maybe music, although I don't know the stats on it.
And I would say, can you imagine like some Beatles albums just being not cataloged, or even rare demo tapes that Paul and John just did? Can you imagine someone being like, just throw it away? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like older games in particular too don't get the love that they need. And I know it would be impossible to have a warehouse housing every single arcade game. That's just not possible. But there has to be a way for us to be able to enjoy these.
They're endangered species, man.
Well, it's our duty to save them. So I think if the license is still active and the company that owns it is still making money, then you have every obligation to pay this company, like I pay Nintendo Online for that service. But I think if
Yeah.
the game is some obscure game from 1986 and it's just gone, does that mean you don't get to ever enjoy that?
Yeah. No, I don't agree with that. Yeah. A couple questions in the chat. Cutthroat Comics says, Rob, at what age did you know you wanted to make movies as an adult? Well, I knew that I wanted to make movies as a kid while I was in the 11th grade, 10th grade. And I just did that from there. Country Boy Niner says, did you guys work directly with Nintendo at all for your latest documentary? No, of course not. Nintendo 64 Quest is the most unofficial, unauthorized Nintendo 64 documentary ever. Much like Nintendo Quest was the most unofficial, unauthorized Nintendo documentary ever. It's so much red tape, and nobody would ever want to say yes to something like that. There's too many incidentals where it's a lot easier to be left alone when you're just doing it on your own, and then there's no obligation to do it again in the future. So we don't do that.
Nintendo's also very, very, very particular with who they work with, and
Yeah.
it just wouldn't work. We tried with the first one, and they didn't want anything to do with it. We got the okay, but yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. I want to jump to the main topic. There's like 15 other things that I have on the outline, but I want to talk about gaming's greatest, most incredible moments in which things changed forever. There's a bunch of different ways you can come at this, Jay. I gave you this topic in advance because I didn't want to surprise you. I want to know, though, what comes to your head first when you think of the greatest moments in gaming,
Sure.
where gaming history changed. Like what comes to the surface?
The first thing is Street Fighter: The World Warrior, Street Fighter 2: The World Warrior, coming to the Super Nintendo in July of 1992. Because I was such a fan, and my friends, of going to the arcade and practicing that game like it was our job, to now being able to take the arcade experience home and practice at home and then go to the arcade. That was the first time where that was just completely game changing for me. And it was still, not as good as the arcade. So there was still that difference. There was still a reason to go downtown to the arcade.
I think for me, it's got to be the first one that came to mind was Doom, and the ability to play infinite matches online with somebody that wasn't beside you, but still know that you're
Yeah.
playing against them like a real person.
Yeah, that was crazy, man. Our
And
neighbor,
it
had great PCs, that a couple PCs in their house, and they could do a LAN thing against each other. But then they hooked mine up, and we would play. Yeah, it blew my mind. I agree.
And it also changed history for me because I started looking at PC games really for the first time. I mean, I had played like King's Quest 4 and
Yeah.
Solitaire and some golf stuff, but I was pretty much a console kid, with
Same.
the NES primarily. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, what's this? And it's like, holy crap. It's a whole different kind of thing. I mean, and a 3D first person shooter was a whole new thing that I'd never seen on the NES that moved at that frame rate in that style too. That was a really big deal.
Yeah, going online for the first time with Quake on my Dreamcast, Phantasy Star on my Dreamcast, going online with that was pretty cool.
What about Mortal Kombat and Mortal Monday, and as a result of that game and others, and the ESRB coming into effect?
Yeah, well, that started with that and Night Trap.
Yep.
Because it was old school politicians that didn't actually do the homework and realized that in Night Trap, you're not trapping and killing the women, you're rescuing them. There's also men in there too. There's a boy, but they don't want to talk about that. They just want to talk about girls having a sleepover party and they have nightgowns in, so they're bad, and so the game's bad. And it was funny just how little knowledge those politicians had. They were so easy in boomer fashion to strike down the hammer on anyone that was having fun, because you can't have fun because they don't have fun. So it's funny.
Yeah. What else comes to mind for you, Jay, that like it's a moment that changed gaming history?
Final Fantasy 11, both on PC and on PlayStation 2. I played it on PS2. World of Warcraft, same thing, having a role-playing game that you were playing online with friends. Xbox Live and Halo 2. So we go from Halo 1, where all of us were bringing our Xboxes over, linking up 3 or 4 TVs, so 12 players. Now changing to no hook links at all. We didn't link up Halo 2 at all, although you could, to just playing with a headset, which was cool but different. I remember doing it in my room after I worked the midnight at EB, and I was like, this is really cool, but different, because I wanted my friends there, but at the same time I was playing with people who I never would have hung out with. So
that brings us to this week's no-win scenario. Kobayashi Maru, Jay Bartlett, if you could only have one gaming experience of GoldenEye with your friends during the 64 era, or the experience of playing World of Warcraft with players from all around the world, including your friends but not in the same space, which gaming experience do you keep and which do you get rid of?
So are we going back to that year in our current year, or are we just reliving it?
Well, erasing it from you ever having that experience. Erasing it from gaming history.
Oh, that's easy. I World of Warcraft is still my favorite game of all time, and I think it always will be. But because of that game, there's a lot that I missed out on. So I would gladly give up all that to play GoldenEye and to experience a lot more of the 2000s than I did. Yeah.
I'm blown away that you'd give up your favorite game of all time.
It's the best game, but it's addicting. It's powerful. I loved it. I played it since 2004 to 2020. And you know the power of it because you had to make a hard choice.
Yeah.
And you gave it up. So I would much rather have gone through all those titles. And don't get me wrong, I didn't miss a lot, especially working at EB. But yeah, I would pick GoldenEye.
Very interesting. Getting rid of your favorite game. That's a good question for all our viewers and listeners out there. What would it take for you to get rid of ever playing your what you now call your favorite video game? What would you have to like? What would that trade off be? What would be worth it to give up that thing? It's like
I mean, I think there comes a point, Rob, with any of these games that when you're playing it and you start to feel guilt, you start to feel a little sick to your stomach because of guilt. I think when it gets to that point, there's an issue. And World of Warcraft certainly was that for me. And I don't know, I would have filled the hours playing some other game, but there's just something for me. Like, I gave it up in like pretty much for good in 2020, the pandemic. Everything going crazy. Everyone's going crazy. No one knows what's going on, what time it is. We're playing 10, 12 hours a day, man. And yeah, you got to let it go at some point,
How many moments do you think there are that have changed gaming forever? And are there more now, the same as before, or they're more earlier on? However you want to define early.
I think they've been in every generation. There's been something that's changed. The way games are made, every single generation, I can name you multiple things. Certainly, technology seems to be moving quicker now, it seems, than it did, say, 80s into 90s, where it was just graphical upgrades that you could tell. Now it's just the way the games are being played and consumed. And Microsoft seems to be obsessed with you having your game and then taking it onto this and then taking it into the bathroom, then putting it on your TV. It's like, nobody cares about that stuff, man. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
you must never separate from the gaming interface.
Yeah, like, I don't need to play. I can play Grand Theft Auto on my TV when I get home or whatever. I don't need to play it on the bus and seemingly play it blah 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 blah. I think that's more.
No, but Jay, you could play it on the bus. You
Switch
could
does
play
it.
it while you're raking leaves.
The Switch does a
Don't
great
ever
job
stop.
of that. You want it on the TV? Cool. You want to play Zelda when you walk around? Cool. That's all you need. You don't need it on every single thing. So, yeah, I think another big event that we're talking about is when the 128-bit era, which would have been Dreamcast, PS2, when the graphics were as good as the arcade or better, and you didn't need to go to the arcade anymore. That was bittersweet. I remember playing Daytona, not on Saturn, but actual Daytona, like on Dreamcast, or Crazy Taxi and Dreamcast, and it being exactly the same. Just having this, wow, we're playing an arcade game in our house, but at the same time, this sadness because you knew what that meant. Well, now I don't need to go play Crazy Taxi downtown. That's a big moment too. I got one more. When Sega was defeated and taken out of the console market, I remember the first day I held Sonic Heroes in my hand for GameCube. I remember that. I was standing behind the counter at work and just like honestly got like tears in my eyes. I was like, this is crazy, man. Like they just couldn't keep up with the big boys anymore. Very sad.
Even Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, when that series started, Mario and Sonic were in the same game. It felt really, really strange. I mean, I even going back further, the whole introduction of a Genesis, a console that could rival the NES, and aggressively did so. And like all of a sudden, people are talking about it outside the world of video games as this other thing, and people are paying attention to it. And gaming is becoming bigger as a result of the introduction of Tom Kalinske as CEO and all those, Genesis does what Nintendo adds.
Well, Sega was very, very smart in outsourcing the arcade games that they did for their first black box games. They had a bunch of in-house games, but they also coded a lot of the Capcom stuff, like Forgotten Worlds, stuff like that, and they put it on their first wave. They're very smart to do that because they're very, very close to the arcade, and there's no way the NES could do that. Like, you look at Strider on Genesis, then you look at Strider on the NES. Completely different game because it had to be. Capcom had to make it different. There's no way they could do that. So they're very smart. And seeing that, and just, Ultra Beast, the characters were like 6-inch on your screen compared to Mario, who's like a little 2-inch, right? It was very smart and it was very different. But it's also why I will say that both those systems existing at the same time was so important, because Sega did not have Mario and they did not have Zelda.
No. And they tried to have Alex Kidd and they tried to have Sonic, and as much as those faces were out there, it didn't have the staying power that Mario had, because Mario had years of being ingrained in people's heads, and it doesn't matter how good the game was, it was still just going to be one game or two games or even three games with Sonic 1, 2, and 3. As big as those were, it still wasn't Mario.
Yeah, no, they're not Mario, and I've stood my ground firm despite the pitchforks coming to my house. I don't like Sonic. I don't think Sonic games are good. I've never really
Getting upset. Rob's
yeah.
getting upset.
The music is wonderful. I think the character's fine, but the first three and then Knuckles and Sonic, I just don't think they're great games. They don't hold a candle to Mario.
I also think all these add-ons is like a really interesting turning point where gaming history, can't go back. The Sega CD, the 32X, and then the Saturn almost sequentially every other year dropping in order to drive market share. And even the Game Gear, like this hardware demand of going after your audience was changing the way in which gamers had to respond to what was out there to keep up with what developers and businesses were trying to do to get you. It was this weird tug of war where it wasn't just buy a console and have it for 9 years and get the software. It was like, okay, now I need this, now I need this, now I need this.
Sega didn't do anything wrong. Having Kalinske at the helm, being a toy guy, a lot of the decisions that were made for the Sega video game space were, in my guess, toy decisions. Having the 32X, so you have a very inexpensive add-on for your current Genesis, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Hasbro model back in the day. You had Joe Stuff, 3 different tiers of vehicles, so every household could afford something of G.I. Joe. That's what Sega was trying to do. The problem is the 32X just wasn't very good. It just wasn't.
It's just a Band-Aid fix, because it was just like, okay, this is good, but we don't have enough games and we're still getting people to buy a new game. It's not like they can take their old stuff and use it, which was kind of the Sega CD problem. It's like, okay, now you get the CD thing, but now you got to buy all these CDs in order to play. And those games weren't very good either.
The Sega CD was just a mess looking back at it. I mean, I would say CD-ROMs didn't really take off until, like, it's stuff like the 3DO really showed what CD-ROM technology could do if you didn't have a computer. Sega CD was pretty good, but it was still very, very grainy. And I think that stuff really took off with 3DO. But obviously, PlayStation is the true winner of all that.
I guess within all that talk, what happened between Nintendo and Sony is a huge gaming moment that forever changed gaming, and you can't go back. You mentioned arcades slowly dying. Well, when we talked about it a little bit earlier too, when physical media starts dying, the introduction of downloadable video games, when that started, it's been on PC forever. I mean, like we talked about Doom already. Like Doom, the first like 3 chapters, whatever, were all free shareware. And if you wanted the other ones, you could pay and they'd send them to you. But you could play Doom for free. You could play Wolfenstein 3D for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the equivalent of like, free to play apps now. But if you wanted the full set, you could go buy a big box version if you want, or they could send it to you if you played directly. And so when downloading hit consoles, it forever changed everything.
It did. And yeah, if we're doing a spotlight, I have something that ties in with that nicely.
We will do a spotlight. We can get to spotlight now, I suppose. Do you have something that you want to go, or should I delay?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So you're big, and everybody can see you.
Yeah. So this is Mothership Zeta, which is an add-on, a physical add-on for Fallout 3. This is kind of what Rob was talking about, where this was a physical boxed item that you would buy at a game store to give you this add-on for Fallout 3. However, when you open it, inside there's no disc. But what you have is this card here. And then you would scratch off the back and enter it. So this was still like them kind of trying to experiment, right? Where you downloaded it digitally, but there was nothing here. I wish they would still do that, because look at this physical box, and this is actually a really, really rare game. This physical copy of Mothership Zeta, but that was the infancy of downloading, and some of the Fallout stuff was on disc, some of it was on a card like this. So really, really, really interesting time in gaming history. So yeah, there's my Mothership Zeta, my favorite expansion on Fallout 3. Oh, there we go. Woo! Woo!
That's a good one. I remember I went nuts looking for all the DuckTales PS3 ones, the one that just had the collector pin, but
Yeah.
just the digital code inside. And of course, later they released it as a physical disc. But I got all of it came out on 360, Wii U, and PS3 as just digital only boxes. And
Yeah.
I got them all just like that.
That's
Even though
how
I had the game
PC
downloaded.
was for a long time. I have a bunch of World of Warcraft on the bottom here that it's just the physical box. And a lot of the collector's editions later, it would just be a code, but they would still give you the
Yeah.
physical items, right?
Yeah. Okay. My spotlight for this week is something from the world of toys, but recent video game as well. And I brought it up because I actually had a question about it for Jay, and that is a new RoboCop figure, but of Alex Murphy. So,
Oh yeah.
so it's cool to see that Murphy exists now, including his blood splatter hand right there when
Oh
he gets shot
god.
off by Clarence Bodiger.
Good old NECA.
It might be easier to see on this side all the different. Look at that. That's just
Yeah,
awful.
that's pretty brutal. It's still that scene is still haunts me, man, to this day.
You should see the alternate cuts that they had of it. They had to take shots out because of the censors. As I learned from the 4-hour RoboCop documentary, RoboDoc, there's another 4-hour one in the works as well as season 2. Do you get to play as Alex Murphy in that RoboCop game that came out not that long ago that seemed to get a
No.
little bit of buzz? Why
No,
not?
because it takes place in between 1 and 2 for the films. Takes place in between 1 and 2. Yeah. Great. It's fantastic game. I've never played like a RoboCop game so great. It's just a wonderful game.
Well, I mean, it's a perfect IP for video games. It's a shock that it hasn't worked out yet for that.
Yeah, the arcade game was good, but like stuff for the NES and that, it was just a Me Too side scroller, nothing big. But this one, it feels like you feel like you're RoboCop, like you feel like you're a walking tank. All the hits feel great, like you can punch guys and they just go flying ragdoll style. It's really fun.
Yeah, I saw you take your spike to somebody on one of your live streams and just eviscerate them with it. Yeah. A reason I bring that up is like what can you do in the game and how limiting it was is because I just had to do a profile on your favorite Nintendo 64 game that lets everybody down, and that's Superman 64.
Right. Yeah.
How come we haven't had a good Superman video game?
It seems like a no-brainer. It really does. I mean, if they can get Batman right, the only thing I could think of is because Superman really has no boundaries. He can fly anywhere. That might be difficult to kind of confide him to one city, but I still think you can do it. But my question to you is like, again, we've talked about Superman for years. I think he's a great character, but like He-Man, he's boring to me because you can't stop him. You can't. You just can't stop him. So how do you do that in a video game? I guess you make him fail to a ring challenge at the beginning, right?
Or you split his attention, right? It's like you got to stop the earthquake in California, or you got to save the city. You got to save New Jersey, right? But my
Yeah.
mother lives in Hackensack, Lex. Where are you gonna go, Soups? Who are you gonna disappoint?
What, Miss
Right?
Boddicker?
And how do you keep people around? Miss Tessmacher! How do you
Miss
keep
Tessmacher, that's it. That's it.
How do you keep Superman from like leaving Earth or whatever if he can fly anywhere? Well, you put a threat there, and he's got people have to stay alive.
Yeah.
You make them pick their poisons, and you show people how hard it is to be Superman, regardless of the strength of their powers. Keep up
Yeah,
with it. It's almost like all the timed missions in Vice City, right? Or any GTA. It's not about surviving. It's about doing everything in the right order so that you can unlock stuff and progress.
Yeah, so I mean, they've done Spider-Man perfect. They've done Batman perfect. There's no reason why Superman shouldn't be on that list. Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. Well, that'll do it for another show. We'll be back this time again next week at noon, which I think is a good time slot. Seems a little bit easier for all of our lunchtime friends on the East Coast. Jay, any last or parting thoughts?
I'll keep everybody updated. I'm supposed to start streaming tomorrow, but I still have no modem, so I can still access YouTube a little bit on my phone. So I'll try and keep everyone up to date. I'm hoping it shows up today. I was just on the phone with the providers, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. So
Awesome. Well, if you've got questions or topics that you want us to consider for a future stream, let us know. We're happy to involve them. We love your questions. We love your engagement. We appreciate your presence. So for myself and Jay Bartlett, for the love of toys, video games, movies, music, the 90s, and of course the 80s too. We don't want to forget the 80s or the 2000s. Whatever your favorite decade is, you're good enough to be here. Take care of yourself.
And each other.
Because the best time of day, Mr. Bartlett, what time is the best time of day?
Game time, buddy. Game time.
Game on, everybody. Take care. Cheers.